Chapter 20 of Pee-wee Harris Adrift. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Pee-wee Harris Adrift by Percy Keese Fitzhugh. Chapter 20. Gone. The steward, or the stew as Townsend thenceforth called him, did not attend the party. A preliminary tour of the grounds convinced him that adventures of his particular kind were not to be found there. Dancing was not in his line. Music, except the clamorous music of his own voice, he did not care for, and he did not care to hear what Mrs. Wilde had to say about the campfire movement. To him, the crucial part of the whole party was the eats, and he lingered near them like a faithful sentinel. The artistic quality of these saved them from devastation. Those pyramids of luscious beauty could not be defiled by human hands without showing the indubitable signs of vandalism. Their very splendor saved them. It is true that he skillfully extracted an olive from the symmetrical mound of chicken salad, and took an almond and a macaroon and other detached dainties that were not made sacred and secure by their own architecture, but for the most part Pee-wee was faithful to his trust. He knew his time would come, and then, oh, then, that proud tower of interlaced sandwiches would look like Rheims Cathedral. Thus an hour passed, and the merry throng emerged upon the lawn and made a direct assault upon the dancing platform, lured by strains of irresistible music. Some strolled about, but none out of the radius of that melodious magnetism, and Pee-wee remained undisturbed on the romantic Isle of Eats. He sat upon the edge of the island, the extreme western coast, fishing for eels with a string, a bent pin, and a salted almond. It seemed that the eels did not care for salted almonds, so Pee-wee endeavored to tempt them with a chocolate bonbon, but the bonbon dissolved on the pin, forming a sort of subterranean chocolate sundae, and the eels ignored it. "I bet I know what's the matter," said Pee-wee. "They're afraid to come near the island on account of the lights." At all events, the eels appeared to shun the neighborhood of the party. They were not in society. Just then Pee-wee had an inspiration. In the light of its consequences, it was probably the most momentous inspiration that he ever had. "I know what I'll do," he said. "I'll use a long, long stick that'll reach way, way, way out." And he glanced about him in quest of a long, long stick with which to beguile the bashful eels. His inquiring eye lit upon one of the long clothesline supporters which Townsend had driven into the river bottom to help hold the island in position. It is necessary to understand the strategical position of this prospective fishing rod. These two poles had been forced down into the muddy bottom just south of the island, and the southern edge of the island lay against them, and was thus prevented from drifting down with the ebbing tide. The makeshift gangplank, gay with bunting, held the island offshore, and the ropes between the island and the bushes steadied it. This crude engineering was quite sufficient, but there is a church somewhere in Europe of which it is said that if a certain brick were removed, the whole edifice would fall in ruins. Pee-wee was not even an amateur engineer. That world-stirring consequences could flow from an act so casual and trivial as securing a fishing rod never entered his innocent and preoccupied mind. He did not know that in the hasty calculations of Townsend, all the component parts of this system of props and fetters were necessary one to another. He removed the brick, and the cathedral fell, and there followed a catastrophe, compared to which the World War is a mere incident. If he had pulled the North Pole out of the earth, the sequel could hardly have been more momentous. Sublimely innocent of the fact that he was unhinging the universe, Pee-wee arose, advanced to the outer pole, and began tugging on it. It did not come up easily, for the force of the rapidly ebbing tide caused the island to press against it like a brake. But he succeeded at last, and as he dragged the muddy pole across the grass, the island turned slowly cornerwise to the shore. In his preoccupation, Pee-wee did not notice this. He tied his fish line to the end of the pole, bent another pin, and provisioned it with a stuffed olive, requisitioned from a cut-glass dish near by. How he intended to support this lengthy pole so that its end might reach the neighborhood of the koi eels is not a part of this narrative, for Pee-wee's angling enterprise never reached that point. He was presently startled by a splash, and looking around he saw that the end of the scaffold had slipped off the island. He was now aroused to the imminent peril of the Isle of Deserts, and to the terrible responsibility which fell to the clothesline in the bushes. As the island turned slowly outward, the clothesline strained but held fast. But the rhododendron bushes had not the same heroic quality. For a few moments they resisted, but the island, now at the mercy of the ebb, tugged, and presently a massive bush gave up the struggle and came away, rope and all. The earthly paradise with its luscious store of cake and chicken salad, its commanding pyramid of sandwiches flanked by icing cakes, its plates of dates and olives and candy of every variety, its mound of jellied doughnuts, and a mammoth freezer full of ice cream, floated majestically down the moonlit river, trailing a huge clump of rhododendron bush after it like the tail of a comet. End of chapter 20.